Hey guys, welcome back to the Dr. Cliff Show. I'm Cliff Olson, Doctor of Audiology and founder of Applied Hearing Solutions in Phoenix, Arizona. And I am joined today by two very special guests, and they happen to be the authors of Here and Beyond, Live Skillfully with Hearing Loss. We have Gael Hannan and we have Shari Eberts. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. So it just happened to work out that you guys are in town for the HLAA convention. I'm actually speaking there later today, so this is kind of like our warm-up here together.
No, it's great.
Absolutely. It'll be great to see you speaking there. It'll be a lot of people are your fans. They'll be.
I hope so. I hope it's more than just 5 or 6 people who know me personally.
Are you speaking about anything interesting?
I'm actually speaking about why best practices are more important than the best hearing aids.
I love that.
Yeah, so, we're on side with that.
Right, and I've been a proponent of hearing aid technology and different features and all of that, and I think that's what a lot of people know me for on the YouTube channel, but I really want people to understand what's most important about hearing aids, and it's not just the hearing aids, right? And I know that you guys are firm believers of that as well.
Absolutely.
That's a big part of our philosophy.
Absolutely. So, love the book, read it myself. Actually, you guys did a signed copy for me back at a conference that I got it from you guys at, so I appreciate that. But there's a bunch of good takeaways from this book, but to get everyone kind of up to speed here right off the bat is you guys both have hearing loss, and you have 2 very unique journeys of hearing loss. So I'd like to hear from you guys kind of what that journey was, just to bring the audience up to speed. So Gail, we'll start with you.
Just age before beauty, right? What a cliche. So I was born with it and diagnosed at age 2.5. I mean, this was the dark ages, decades before newborn hearing screening. Cause unknown, and a lot of the usual suspects, like my mother had a challenging pregnancy, didn't gain much weight, had a horrible birthing process, and I was a very, very small but very cute baby. So there were a few issues, and diagnosed at 2.5 with sensorineural bilateral hearing loss. But I didn't have a hearing aid because I was born in the mid-50s, and at that point, they only had the body aids, and my hearing loss was mild. So no hearing aid as a child, no hearing aid as a teenager, which being a teenager is tough enough, let alone having an issue like hearing loss. And it wasn't until I was out on my own in my early 20s, and I realized how much hearing loss I had. When you leave the protected family environment and you're out on your own, I said, I'm not doing well. I want a hearing aid. So I went to a different doctor, had a hearing aid within a month, life-changing. Fast forward a couple of decades, hearing kept getting worse, severe to profound, but technology kept getting better. Then it wasn't until age 40 till I got 2, but at that time I was expecting a baby, and I went, oh, I'm going to be responsible for this being. What if I don't hear him crying in the night? What if I don't hear him burp? Will he blow up? I mean, who tells you this stuff? So for the first time, Cliff, I reached out to other people with hearing loss, and that changed my life. And I became involved as a volunteer, and then it became what I do. My passion has been to help people understand the impact of hearing loss on their lives in every area. So it became presenting. My background is theater. I used a lot of performance. I started writing, and I've been writing for Hearing Health Matters for a million years now, and wrote a first book, and then brought me up to my second book, we'll talk about later. So basically, severe to profound, get worse, technology gets better, and but I'm passionate about hearing loss. The more I learn about it, the better I communicate.
Now, I'm married to a nurse, and your mother was a nurse.
She was.
And so I think, is that part of the reason why, you, early identification back then, 2.5 years, and it seems like your parents were very supportive and helpful.
Oh my, Cliff, it wasn't until I became involved with other people with hearing loss that I realized how many people grew up thinking they were lesser than, or even some felt stupid. But no, my mom was a nurse and recognized some of the behavioral things. And my parents were adamant that I be a good communicator, that I speak well, let people know that I had hearing loss, and they were very supportive of that. So I sure, I had a bit of stigma that I dealt with later on, but it wasn't from them. And I really had, that was, well, Sherry's going to tell you her story, and it's quite different.
Yeah, I was going to say, your story is totally different from that. You did not have the support system, so to speak, that Gail had growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I first noticed my hearing loss, I was already in my 20s. I was in business school, and pretty quickly into the first semester, I started missing things in class, right? The whole class bursts out laughing, or somebody makes a comment as an aside, and I was just kind of looking around the room trying to figure out what was going on, and that's a typical hearing loss experience. But I kind of knew what was happening because I had grown up watching my father struggle with his own hearing loss, and he was highly stigmatized by it. So he would do anything to hide it. He had his hair, grown long down over his ears, well after, that was fashionable. And I remember lots of family parties where he would be sort of sitting off by himself, his back to the festivities. And I remember I asked him one time, "Why are you sitting all by yourself at this family party?" And he said to me, if people want to talk to me, they know where to find me. And I didn't think much about it. But then once I had my own hearing loss, I realized he probably was struggling so much in that loud party environment, and he just didn't know how to cope. And I think it was so important to him that people not know about his hearing loss that he felt like isolating himself might hide that. So when I first discovered this, I was very, very traumatized by this because I had seen the hearing loss really pull him away from the family, from his friends, from everything that he loved. And I worried that this was going to be me. And I did follow in his footsteps for many, many years. I got hearing aids, but I would, wear them only when absolutely necessary, and I never really talked about it. But then I had children of my own, and my hearing loss is genetic, right? My father had it, and I have it. His mother had it. And I saw my kids watching me do the same behaviors as I had watched my father do. And I knew I was passing on this stigma to another generation. And I really felt like I just wanted to break that cycle. So it was finally time, for me to accept my hearing loss, and I did. And of course, I never do anything halfway, so I went all the way to the other direction and started a blog and started talking about it and really trying to show them how you can live your best life with hearing loss. And so that's really been my inspiration for writing and doing our documentary, We Hear You, to really try and help bring down that stigma for other people about hearing loss.
So it's kind of funny how you guys started in two different places with your hearing loss journey, and you ended up kind of converging into the same place, really. And I have to ask, what possessed you guys to write a book, and not just write a book, but write one together? Because that seems like a pretty hefty endeavor to undertake.
Well, it was, but I didn't realize. I'm a very impulsive person.
That's true.
I can
That's
relate.
true.
I can relate to that.
I'm very impulsive. I go, oh, okay, no, yeah. I had written my first book called The Way I Hear It, and it was a memoir and survival guide. It was a really good book. And I saw a lot of books coming out like that, and they still are more and more now because it's easier to publish a book. We had come away from the strategies, and there no longer seemed to be a reference or a resource that helped people, helped guide them. And it was something I never had, Sherry never had. So I just finished publishing my other book, blah, 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 and I thought, okay, this is strategies. I'm not terribly strategic, I'm impulsive, but I knew I wanted, stop laughing, I must be. So I knew Sherry not that well. We had a lot of mutual friends in the industry, and now we're like this. But Sherry once said to me, she goes, "Oh, I'd like to write a book." And I said, "No, you don't want to write a book. It's so much work, blah, blah, blah." And then I thought, boy, rather than, she might just write a book. Maybe I should reach out and But no, Sherry was the one that I felt would be good. And so I reached out, sent her an email, and this was April or May of 2020, said, say, you want to talk about a project? Sure. What about? Do you want to write a book? Sure. What about? I'm going, hearing loss? No.
Duh.
Yeah. So we started talking about it, and we decided, so we started, and it was May of 2020, and boom, the pandemic.
Yeah.
We didn't see each other for 2 years, but that's what we did with our pandemic. We wrote this book, and we found that we were so simpatico and so on point. And this was the book that neither of us had and could have used in our journey. It didn't matter, at what point you develop your hearing loss. So that was my impetus for reaching out.
So Shari, what do you think when she's reaching out about this, about writing a book?
Well, I had always wanted to write a book, actually. And a lot of what I do on my blog is to talk about sort of tips and tricks and strategies. So it made a lot of sense to me, the idea that she had for the book. And I thought it would be a really great idea to have our two different stories combined, because we do have very different experiences. But when we started talking about it, I think what was really interesting is we both found our way to these same skills and philosophies that helped us to live well with hearing loss. And so the more that we talked about it, the more I really felt like we were onto something, right? Because it worked for both of us, these strategies, and we have very different hearing losses and different life experiences. So I was really happy to work with Gael.
I was waiting for you to say that.
Okay.
That's why we said.
I was really happy to work with Gael because I've always admired, all the advocacy that you do, and I think we're like a very good combination of, I'm more structured, she's a little more impulsive, and so we balance each other out, and it was a really sort of good for the writing of the book because I think it's very easy to read and entertaining to read, but it also has a lot of useful information, and you can tell us what you think, but in an easy, structured way. So it's accessible and fun at the same time.
Yeah, and you guys, like you said, you both have your different experiences. I'm thinking of the experience that you actually gave in the book. You were, I guess, dating a guy, and you were out on a date, and you're like, I didn't really hear what he said, but I'm just going to respond with either a yes or no. And you responded with no, and then he asked,
"Who's telling this story?" That's my story. You
I
can
tell you, but I cracked up at this because, and I cracked up at it because I think, looking in the past, you can crack up at that. But the thought of that there's people out there right now who are doing that, and they're literally wrecking relationships because they are not following really the guide that you guys are presenting inside of this book that would help so many more people with their journey of hearing loss.
We hear from people all the time, and that particular story was referring to bluffing and how we bluff. We know that hearing people bluff as well. We do. Everyone bluffs for a number of reasons, but with us, it's so hard to sometimes lose a conversation. You speak, and then you speak by the time I get to you, and it's so challenging. We bluff. We're the listening fatigue, all of these things, and so we bluff, and it's very dangerous to bluff because, at the very least, it's dishonest, and then you think, oh my gosh, what did I just agree to? So it affected my life because I ended a relationship because I couldn't understand him. And what we hear from people is, oh, there's a word for that, bluffing. People don't even realize that they're doing it and how. Now, we would both tell you that it's almost impossible to stop bluffing completely. Shari doesn't bluff as much as I do, because I'm very, very good at it. But we can bluff less, and it's all these things that we don't realize that we're doing that we can change. And that's why we call it living skillfully, because we can learn to do things better, best practices, if you will, and just make some minor shifts. And
so my question is that when you start from, you don't even have an outline that you guys are going from initially when you decided you wanted to write a book. And so you had to figure out all the different things that you wanted to layer in there. And then this idea of bluffing, so is that a term that is very widespread and well known throughout the hearing loss community, like that literal term that you're like, we need to put a name on this and have it inside of the book? Like, how did you decide what you needed to name different things?
well, bluffing is bluffing. So it's always been that term. So I'm not sure if it's a term that hearing care professionals use.
Well, I think of it when I'm gambling, bluffing, right? Like you're bluffing when you're playing, I don't know, poker, right?
But Cliff, that's exactly what it is. Bluffing is when you pretend to understand, smiling and nodding, when you haven't got a freaking clue what's going on. So you are bluffing, and the other person thinks, oh, she's understanding me, she's following along. So that's where the bluffing term gets in. I'm sure there's other terms, but
Well, and a lot of it I think is just the stigma. Like I think back to my father, like the amount of time he just stood there and nodded and laughed at things that he didn't hear. And you can see it on somebody's face. As much as we think we're bluffing and we're doing a good job at it and people don't know, you can feel that distance. Okay, but she's an actress.
Yeah, right.
But I do think it separates you from people, right? And
Yeah.
so I think it's sort of a common term, and I think when you hear the word, you know exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And so you guys had to pick out a lot of different things that people with hearing loss do to try to get through situations and actually put pen to paper, or if that's what you even call it anymore, pen to paper, fingers to keyboards,
Yeah.
I guess. But there's a lot of other key things that were takeaways for me in this book. And I think probably the strongest for me personally was this idea of a mind shift. So can you guys explain what a mind shift is and how that relates to individuals with hearing loss?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one, I think, the most powerful concepts in the book. And it's something that just relates so much to my life, right? And just, my father never had that mind shift. I had to change my thoughts about hearing loss and what I thought about myself because of my hearing loss, and try and flip that on its head. And by doing that, you become more comfortable in your own skin, more comfortable talking about your hearing loss, more comfortable advocating for yourself. So, for example, people sometimes think, I don't want people to know about my hearing loss because they'll think I'm slow or they'll think I'm out of it. And the fact is that if you tell people about your hearing loss, you'll communicate better. And so it's just flipping that on its head, and that allows you to take the behaviors that you need in order to make sure that communication works. So, and we kind of worked on that terminology for a long time. Like we would bounce ideas back and forth. I can't remember if we had other names for mind shifts. I'm sure we did. But it's something that, it's a shifting of the mind. It's a mental process.
And it was something that you were doing, but it didn't have a name associated with
Exactly.
it. So to teach someone else that would be a very abstract concept until you can kind of wrap it into like, here's actually what we're doing.
Yeah.
So from a mind shift perspective for you, at what point did you start having mind shifts yourself?
I think the start was when I reached out for support when I was expecting my baby, and I went to a hearing loss conference, and a woman sat down with me and comforted me and let me know that I was going to be a good mom because I could do this, this, and this. But at that conference, it was the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association conference, and all these people with hearing loss were walking around smiling, looking happy. They were okay with this, wearing big honking hearing aids, and I learned about all of these things, and that in itself was a mind shift. And I do need to share one mind shift. It was at the end of that conference, 3 days, and the very last night I went out for a drink with some of my new hearing loss friends, and we went into a pub. There was no one else there except a table of 4 people in the corner, presumably hearing people. And I don't know if you have ever gone out for drinks, Clip, with a group of people with hearing loss, because we are loud, and
I'd fit right in. I would fit right in.
That's right.
And that's always been one of the most embarrassing things for me. And even now, last week I said something, and my husband went, the universal sign of you're bellowing, lower it, and it's embarrassing for me still. But anyway, I was noticing these looks from these people in the corner, and I was like, oh. And then I went, so what? So what? This is what having hearing loss is like. And I felt like this cloak of shame had fallen off me. That is a mind shift. And they're usually not quite so dramatic as that. What's a mind shift for you? And was it?
Well, a similar one I think is, I feel all alone in my hearing loss. I have no one to talk to. No one else understands. And then for me also, going to an HLA convention for the first time, I saw there were all these people who were like me, and I could learn from them. I could be inspired by them. And I could be empowered by them, and we can learn from each other. And so that was such a big mind shift for me as well. I remember the first conference that I was going to, it was hard for me. I was like, I don't know, am I one of these people with hearing loss? Is that me? Is that how I'm going to think about myself? And then you get there and you see all these people who are just living so well with something that I only saw people live not well with. And I felt like, yes, I can do it. And that was such a huge mind shift for me because it gave me confidence. And still, every time I come into a hearing loss convention or meet with other people with hearing loss, I get even more confident, right? Because I learned something, hopefully they learned something. And that's been another great thing about this book, right? Is that we feel like we're sharing what we know, but we hear from people all the time about what they know and how it just brings us together as a community.
And sometimes, though, it takes a book like this to make those conversations out in the open, because sometimes otherwise they wouldn't, I'm thinking of a mind shift myself. Now, I come at this from a little bit different perspective, because as a hearing care professional who works with a lot of individuals with hearing loss, I remember my first day in clinic as a student, I was scared to death, because when you're working with someone who has, let's just say, severe level hearing loss, you're thinking and you're getting yourself all worked up before they even come in of like, how am I going to even communicate with this person, right? And you're just like, you're deathly afraid that you're not going to be able to communicate with the person just to instruct them on how to do the test that you want to do on them. And I remember distinctly when it was, I'm pretty sure that a patient could tell that I was extremely nervous about this, and like, listen, it's okay. We're going to figure out a way to communicate with each other so we can get through this. And I'm like, I needed that, right? Because I needed to shift my mindset of like being so rigid. Here's what I have to do, and here's what, the test that I have to perform, and start treating it more like we're just going to be two humans that can do anything in our power to communicate well with each other. And I needed that to happen for me early on. And I think that has changed the way that I practice as an audiologist. I think a lot of people would think of me as being a very rigid individual when it comes to treatment with a high level of precision and all of that. But at the end of the day, we're all humans here just trying to get through this thing together, right?
That's a fabulous story. I remember when I had a very bad onset of tinnitus. It sort of came to visit in the state, but I called my audiologist and she said, come in Monday, come in right away, come in Monday. So I did come in Monday, but she had chosen the night before to have a baby, so she wasn't there. And so the audiologist taking her place had just graduated from audiology university 8 weeks before. It was fine. So I'm telling her about this and how to live my whole life with this. I don't know, there's tears, and I look up and she's got tears running down her face, and I went, oh, I said, you're going to have to toughen up. You are. She goes, I know. It's just, I feel so badly for you. So it was lovely, but it wasn't particularly helpful.
Well, I think that's a big thing sometimes that hearing care professionals say, well, I don't know what to say. Because it is such an emotional experience. And so, you feel like, so what can you say to someone like that? And for me, I think the answer is just to listen, right? You don't have to have the perfect thing to say. Just tell me more about that. Because the more that we can express ourselves about our hearing loss, the better that relationship will be. And the more you can help us, right? Because you'll better understand where we really are struggling. And so I love that story. And I love that story because it really touches on the personal connection. And that's really what I think we are all looking for from our hearing care professionals, in addition to, their expertise. But that human connection really gets you to that next level of care.
We're very big, Shari and I, on building strong relationship with your hearing care professional. My hearing care professional is an important person in my life. I mean, that person who understands what I'm going through and help and all of that. But it's very important, as Shari was saying, to listen in both ways. And we talk about this a lot in the book, and that's one outcome we like to see that perhaps help people reading are new to hearing loss and are distrustful of their hearing care professionals. And this has to be your ally. If you really have issues with a certain hearing care professional, find another one. But you know, so we're all about support systems and relationships, and working with Dr. Cliffs is really there you go.
You know, I like to try to be as much of a foundation of support as possible, and you know, I think again, going into like just the medical world in general, you know, and again to bring up my wife who's a nurse, you know, when someone comes in with some kind of ailment, when she worked in the ER, it could have been something that's incredibly emotional and nerve-wracking for someone, and it's not any different from someone who has a hearing loss, who even a long-standing hearing loss, or especially a sudden hearing loss where there's a lot of confusion, people don't know what's going on with that. And it's the job of the professional to be like, listen, I know that you're scared or worried or you're upset or whatnot, but I've seen this before, and I'm here to be a support system for you, right? And I think that that's very important. I try to practice that way every day to bring some comfort to patients who come in with hearing loss in my clinic. But you know, I think that there's, you know, and one of the reasons why hearing loss is such an emotional thing is because hearing can help you maintain strong connections with individuals. And you know, if hearing is something that is important to you, because it doesn't have to be, right? I mean, we have the deaf community that you know, that have hearing loss or have no hearing, so to speak, and they have other forms of communication that they stay connected with friends, families, loved ones, and whatnot. But for individuals who want to be able to hear and use hearing as a form of communication, they go into situations with their hearing loss, and even if it's treated, they can still struggle. And so there is an acronym that you guys had in the book called HEAR that can help people with that. So can you guys help explain that acronym and how someone out watching right now could use this when they find themselves in a tricky environment?
Well, we love that. It's one of our favorite tools that we have in the book. And so HEAR stands for 4 different steps that you can use really in any situation to improve that situation. And you might not get it to be perfect communication, but you can get it to be better. And so the first step is hearing check, right? Can I understand what my communication partner is saying? And if the answer is yes, that's great, just keep on going. But if it's no, you move to the next one, and that's to evaluate. And so this could be a number of different things. Why are you having trouble hearing? Is it the environment? You know, do you need to turn the lights on a little bit so you can see for lip reading, or turn the music around, or move to a different chair? Or, you know, maybe it's your communication partner, that they're not speaking loud enough, or they're speaking very rapidly, and so that's something that can be changed. So you're sort of evaluating the situation and figuring out what it is. And then also you can look at your tech tools, right? So like, do I have a remote mic? Do I have a speech-to-text app? Would something like that improve the situation? And then you get to articulate, the A, and that's the hardest step, right? We've been talking about the bluffing, we've been talking about the stigma, but you're not going to have better communication if you don't explain what your needs are. So articulate, you need to tell people what you need them to do, or you need to move that seat, or you need to take some kind of action. And then the last thing is revise and remind, because a lot of times it's hard to keep that communication going. Maybe it gets later and a musician shows up and it gets louder, so maybe you need to go back through the steps. Or we're talking to someone who doesn't always speak that loudly, as you do, Dr. Cliff, and you need to remind them, can you please, you know, speak up a little bit? So it's very easy, and it's something that you can do in every situation. And what I love the most about this tool is that we can use it, but our family and friends can use it too. Everyone can use it. So when we would go out to eat when my son was younger, I would remember we'd go to the restaurant and he would say, okay, Mom, you know, this is where you're gonna sit because you're gonna hear best here in the corner, and I'm gonna sit over here, and this person's gonna sit there. And so it just made me always feel so loved and supported, that other people in our lives who are trying to help that too. So it's a tool for everyone, to really improve any communication situation.
I love it.
Yeah, it's a mental checklist, and it happens really quickly. And people may do this already, but when they actually understand what they are doing and why, and it becomes a process, or was it process, as you say in the States? Process. I'm Canadian. But yeah, it's a wonderful tool. It's about communicating. And I just wanted to say one of the key things for Shari and I, we both found our way to this prior to even starting on the book. For me, you asked what was a mind shift. What I realized is that I had to change my goal. I had to change my goal from wanting to hear better, because or hear well. I might never hear well again, but from hearing, want to hear better. But shift that to wanting to communicate better, because hearing is only one part of communication. The other part is articulating in any which way. It's all of these other things. It's about communicating. So even if we don't hear well, we can find other ways to communicate. Communication is the glue that connects people to each other. It is right up there with water and food and air and wine, and it's important. And hearing loss impacts communication. So this is a big thing for us, and we talk about it a lot. Shift from not wanting just to hear better, but to communicate better.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a really good point. So, I talk a lot about hearing aid technology, cochlear implants, auditory brainstem implants, pretty much anything that you can use to hear better. Right? And I think that a big role, one of the key roles of an audiologist who's working with individuals who have hearing loss is going to focus on a technological component to try to enhance someone's ability to hear for the ultimate goal of communication. But communication is not just technology, right? In fact, you could say that there's a three-legged stool that it comes to communication. So, and you guys talk about that in your book, and technology is just one of the legs of that stool.
Well, that's what I always love to say, is sort of there's this three-legged stool, and a funny thing about a three-legged stool is it never wobbles.
Why?
I don't know.
Okay.
We've looked into it. It's something to do with physics, and we don't know. If anyone knows, let us know.
Listen, I will get a physics individual here on the show. I don't even know what you call them. A physicist? I'll get a physicist
there you
on
go.
the show to explain this to us.
Thank you. That would be very helpful. So it's a three-legged stool, and like you said, one of the legs is technology, and it's a hugely important leg. But two of the legs are not technology. And that's really why we think this book is so important, because it's all those other aspects that you need in order to live as well as you can with hearing loss. And so one of the legs is the mind shifts, sort of that emotional shift that you go on and that ability to change the way you think about hearing loss. Of course, the technology, and then the communication game changers or behavioral changes, other skills and strategies that help your technology work better. Right? And putting those together allows you to focus not just on hearing, but that communicating that we've been talking about.
So for instance, one of those would be like watching someone's mouth when they're speaking to you, right? Taking visual cues.
Yeah, speech reading.
Right, speech reading, right? Which is more than just the lips, but
Exactly.
it's like mannerisms of the individual as well, right?
But also understanding that you're doing that. So, I think the pandemic, when everyone started wearing masks, two things. For the hearing loss community, it threw us back to a bad place from before. But also, it made hearing people realize, oh my goodness, how much they depended on the visual, non-articulated information. So speech reading is one communication behavior. Others are like what we've talked about, self-advocacy, self-identifying, not bluffing. So things that are not technical in nature. So
like here, right?
Yeah,
here.
that's
That
a tool,
process, that mental checklist, perfect example of a way you can communicate better has nothing to do with technology, right? But you can use technology as part of that to enhance the situation.
And it's support systems. you don't communicate by yourself. Communication by its very nature, I think we say in the book, communication is a tango for two and a folk dance for many. You need other people. I sort of slurred over that. Tango for two, folk dance for many. Is that right? Yeah. You communicate with other people.
Well, I think it's a key thing here is that, so someone like myself who is going to communicate with someone else who has hearing loss, and I think I can speak for the broader population of individuals who don't have a ton of communication difficulty. I think all of us have some communication difficulty, whether it's hearing related or not. But I appreciate if someone were to come up to me and say, hey, I have difficulty with this, or could you do this to help the communication? I would be appreciative of that. Right? Like, I would want someone, if they need some additional assistance, to let me know what that assistance is, because I like to be an accommodating individual, right? And I don't like to have to guess, and I don't like the awkward feeling for myself of like, am I doing things the right way? Because sometimes I don't even know if I am doing the right thing, even if I'm trying to.
Well, that's the hard thing, is people don't know, right? And hearing loss is also invisible. So if you don't ask someone or tell someone, I really need you to speak up a little bit, or, can you remove that mask, or can you just speak a little bit more slowly? They're not going to know just by looking at you, right? Maybe sometimes they'll see your hearing aids, but sometimes they won't. And so it's really up to us to articulate. And I think we worry that we're going to be putting someone out, right? Or we're going to be imposing our needs on someone. But the fact is, most of the time, people want to be helpful. They want to do the right thing. They're trying to communicate with us, right? As much as we're trying to communicate with them. And so everybody wins, but it really, I think, is up to us to express our needs, because people are not going to know it if we don't share that with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think and here we go back to the emotions of hearing loss, frustration. We have to do that, but we have to keep doing that over and over and over. It's very hard, it's difficult for people to change the way they speak. If you have a naturally soft voice, it's difficult to maintain, or we look as if we're following and something might have happened and we've lost the thread. Again, we need to tell people. So, but it can be frustrating. I can tell you, the hearing husband, that's what I call my husband, and he's the hearing husband, and I've been married for decades. But there isn't a day that goes by that there isn't some minor little hearing-related incident because he starts talking to me while he's walking away, or I do that, or I'll ask him to repeat himself, and he'll over-enunciate. There's all these little things that, so it's a constant replay, and that's what communication is like. So we have to deal with these frustrations, and and understand that there's another person at play here as well. So.
And it's funny because these communication strategies that you speak of, they are just good communication strategies regardless of whether or not someone has hearing loss or not.
And I think that's like one of the power really of hearing loss peers, and we talk a lot about that in the book too, because it's a place where you can go. And when we go out to dinner, everyone makes sure that everyone has the right seat. Did you hear that? We'll repeat it 15 times, right? It's just like a low stress environment where everybody's in the same boat, and everyone will pull out all the stops to make sure that everyone can communicate. And sometimes you just need that break, right? Because it can be exhausting to advocate for yourself all of the time. And so I just always encourage people, go to that hearing loss convention. You may not feel like that's a place for you, but it's actually going to be so relaxing, and you're going to learn so much. So that's me on my soapbox, for hearing loss peers. But it's such an important part, I think, of building confidence and getting a break from that constant having to advocate for yourself, because it's just part of the experience.
Love it. So now, one of the other parts that you guys talk about, something that can be learned, are hearing hacks. Now, you guys, some people might call me a hearing hack in certain circles, but but
point when we started talking about what we're going to call them, and we wanted something memorable and stuff, it was a hack. To me, because I'm older than Shari, a hack is someone who
now don't gesture towards me.
But you made yourself the example. So a hack is someone who's not very good at their job, like the hack writer or something, a hack HCP, or you hack into something. And Shari said, no. It's how to do something better. It's like a life hack. And so anyway, came up with hearing hacks, very cute. And hearing hacks are any tool, and they can be a physical tool or a mental tool, something that makes the situation better. And we have hacks for everything. So going to the theater, going to the movies, watching television, going out for dinner, hiking, all sorts of leisure activities. And we did devote a whole section to the book on hearing hacks. And there's some hearing hacks that apply to everything. And they're, like be prepared. If you're going out for dinner, well, if you know it's noisy, maybe you pick a different restaurant, but be prepared. Show up early if it means, like Shari goes to the theater a lot, so she makes sure that the devices are set up.
So give me an example. So going to the movie theater, other than getting there early, there are several other hacks that people could use to actually hear at the movie theater better. So what would some of those be for someone who's new with hearing loss?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of doing research ahead of time to find out at that theater what devices do they have available. Sometimes there's caption glasses, sometimes there's these Captiview things that you can put into your cup holder. And they don't always work 100% of the time, but they do work if you arrive early. Maybe you get 2 devices just in case one fails. You have a backup. Enlist, your family and friends to, you go get the seat, they go get the Captiview. Lots of different things like that. There's also open captioned performances, so you can look on websites in advance in your area to figure out when those are. The problem is, I think, a lot of times that the people with hearing loss, we don't even know these things exist, right? So if we don't know they exist, we can't use them. And so part of what I think hearing care professionals can do is to let people know about some of these hacks.
I think that's a very good idea. I have several patients who travel internationally and they love going on tours. And so what do they do on tours? Well, they give you these little headphones that you can put in your ears, and so you can hear the tour guide speaking. And they're like, Cliff, that does nothing for me. Like, I need the sound to be in my hearing aids and amplified. And so I tend to recommend that a lot of my patients get telecoils inside of their hearing aids. And then I tell them to get, and I send them a link for Amazon for a $40 telecoil neck loop that they can hang around their neck. They unplug the crummy headphones that come along with those little transmitter packs. They plug in the telecoil neck loop. They switch their hearing aid into telecoil mode, and all of a sudden they're getting a better audio signal than anybody else on the tour, and that is what you guys would call a hearing hack.
Right. Write that down, Shari. Write that down. Yeah. Exactly. It's all of those things are so important, and there's new stuff coming out all the time. Speech to text is normally quite wonderful in noisy environments. Shari and I went to a conference. I'm not going to say the word.
Okay.
We went to a hearing professional conference last fall, and so the room wasn't looped. There was no telecoil. There was no captioning. So we were like, oh. So we had our speech to text, and we had it up against the water. Yeah, and we're going great. And then we went. It went way off, and there were these sexual terms coming out. We were like, and that kind of did it for us. We were like,
and we're like in the front row of this thing, and we both just kind of burst out laughing at an inappropriate time. So we're like, okay, turn this off.
At the same conference.
Yeah. Oh, then one next door, yes, on sexual dysfunction or something. Yeah.
We tried to get some pictures of it, so we could show people because it was pretty funny. Yeah. So it doesn't always work, right?
But when life gives you lemons, you chuckle at it, right?
Exactly.
Like that's just kind of how that works.
Yeah, we laugh a lot.
That's true. But I love that you tell your clients about that, right? Because it's such a simple thing. Like, a lot of these hacks are very simple, and very obvious.
And not
Once-
expensive.
And not expensive once you know about them.
Right.
And so it's how do you find out about that, right? Part of, again, another part of the reason we want to write this book is to put all these ideas in one place, because there's so much work involved when you have hearing loss to just learn about all the different things. And for hearing care providers as well, right? Just to stay up to date on all these changes. So if we can learn about it from you guys, that saves us a lot of that work. And so hopefully this book helps point people, in that
Well, I
direction.
think it's good because you even reference in there, like, certain hearing care professionals might be more up to speed on different hearables and over-the-counter devices. And I can say from an audiologist perspective who does a YouTube channel that focuses on all of these different technologies, it is more than a full-time job to try to stay up to speed with all these things and still be an expert with treating individuals with up to 3 brands of hearing aids, not even doing all the different brands that are out there. So it can be very difficult, but I think that it's at least getting yourself familiar as a hearing care professional with, like, what are these things? Even if I don't have a deep knowledge of all the different PSAPs out there, the hearables, the OTC devices, having a foundational understanding and then having at least a couple of key pieces of information in your back pocket that you can relay to someone to where the individual with hearing loss can be more of an advocate for themselves and start to do more research, maybe watch and subscribe to the Dr. Cliff YouTube channel, right? Or go and get the book Here and Beyond to learn more themselves, right? And I think that that's probably the biggest takeaway that someone should have from this book is that this is a really good resource and guidebook, making people aware of stuff that they had no clue even existed.
Yeah. I think resources is the key thing there. You don't, as a professional, have time to do all of that. I mean, patient-centered care takes time. You are treating. You are working with a person, not a hearing loss. And so you can't do all of it all the time, but part of your role, as we see it, is to know where to refer for additional resources. The book is obviously one. To different websites that can provide this sort of thing. Where they can go and give them extra tools. And so you don't have to be an expert on all of them. You just have to know where to send.
Yeah, at least be able to kind of, and we have information that we compile at our clinic, and then when someone gets to their 6-week follow-up, so we have a 6-week best practice fitting sequence we put patients through, we give them a resource folder at the end of it that has, where are the hearing loss support groups in the area that they can go to? What are different communication strategies, not just for them, but for their hearing husbands as well, to help them communicate better with their spouse who has hearing loss. Different troubleshooting guides for their hearing technologies, different resources of different, accessibility features that exist out there. So stuff that we might not have time to go through in detail with every single person, but at least we can give them a resource to say, hey, go and start doing some more work on your own, because just because you got fit with hearing aids and you're doing well right now doesn't mean that learning should stop.
Absolutely. And I think it's a constant learning process. We're always getting more skillful. And I think we mentioned that. That's why we picked that word, because a skill is something that you can practice. It's something you can get better at. It's something you can be taught. So it's sort of a lifelong journey, right? But if you don't know the direction you're going, you don't know where to look, it's so much harder. And that's where the partnership comes in, right? If you can say, these are the places where you can go to learn more, or this is a new thing that you should investigate, that at least points us in the right direction. That's half the battle.
Absolutely. And I think that this book is a terrific head start for anyone who has hearing loss, who is either just recently diagnosed, or if you've had hearing loss for 30 years, right? A great resource to get going, and I really appreciate you guys writing this. I think that this will probably be something that will make it into my 6-week folder in terms of suggested reading material for the patients who come into my clinic, and hopefully other hearing care professionals would do the same thing for their patients. But guys, I really appreciate you coming out to the show. I know I'll probably see you later today when I speak at the convention here in Phoenix, but I have a parting gift for you guys. Everybody who comes on the show gets their very own So
Is it a puppy?
Not a puppy.
wouldn't that be hilarious, right? Is the Dr. Cliff Show mug.
Awesome.
I need one of these.
Yeah.
Oh, this is
Appreciate
great.
that.
But yeah, again, thank you so much, and thank you for taking probably 2 years to put all of the knowledge that you guys have of your own hearing loss and putting it into written form so other people can benefit from that as well. Guys, if you enjoyed this show, make sure that you hit that thumbs up button. And if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button with notification bell, and we will see you next time.